Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. If it's happening out there, it's coming to you live right here. This is CBS News 24/7. Right now, we're watching Tropical Storm Ernesto, and it could become a hurricane at any minute. It's already knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of people as it slams Puerto Rico and now heads towards Bermuda. Hamas says it will not take part in the latest round of ceasefire negotiations as Israel remains on high alert for a likely attack from Iran. Plus, inflation cooled last month, but is it enough for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates? We'll break down the newest report just ahead. But we are going to begin with Tropical Storm Ernesto, gaining strength as it barrels across the Caribbean towards the island of Bermuda. Overnight, Ernesto slammed Puerto Rico's east coast, bringing heavy rains, flash flooding, and sustained winds of up to 70 miles per hour. The president has already declared a state of emergency there. And Christian Benavides joins me now from Miami to talk about this. So, Christian, what's the situation like in Puerto Rico where you are right now? It can be deceiving because it looks not too bad.
Well, currently we're in Miami, so things are not looking bad here. Puerto Rico, however, parts of Puerto Rico are being dumped. Rain, Ernesto is dumping a bunch of rain in Puerto Rico, and at this point there is concern, the potential for flash flooding. You've got about 300,000 customers without power on the island. And remember that the power grid there is quite sensitive. We remember what happened back when Hurricane Maria slammed the island. Now, to be clear, Ernesto is no Hurricane Maria. This was a tropical storm. It is forecasted to intensify later on today, but it has moved past Puerto Rico, but some of the rain bands are still slamming parts of the island. Again, some 300,000 customers without power, and you've got this heavy rain that continues to pour on the eastern side of the island. The power utility company, which has done a number of upgrades over the years, is hoping that they'll be able to recover from this as quickly as they possibly can. They spoke to CBS News 24/7 just a bit ago. Let's take a listen.
Luma and Puerto Rico are much better prepared than in the past in terms of a response to a storm or a hurricane. Number one concern, of course, is the wind damage that there could be, flooding, and any impact to the electric infrastructure that you can see right now in one of our substations. 32 segments at this point of transmission lines have been impacted. Right now, we have 570,424 customers out of service out of 1.4 million customers that Luma has. At midnight, we had around 22,000 customers out of service. 3 a.m., about 109,000. 5 a.m., 200,000. And then that went up to 360,000 at 7 a.m. And then it increased to 545,000. The stages are 3.
Vlad, the primary concern here, in addition to what's happening with power, also has to do with the heavy rain and the flash flooding. In the past, there have been communities in Puerto Rico that have just, because of the flash flooding, have been essentially disconnected from some parts of the roads have been impassable for people to be able to get through, to get in things like food and medical supplies. Now, again, this is a tropical storm. We'll have to see what happens on the other end. The primary concern, electricity, and then, of course, the potential for flash flooding from these heavy rains.
All right. So, Christian, you're in Miami. We're looking at a satellite image of the storm basically over Puerto Rico. But now, tell me where it's headed next.
Well, it is forecasted to head towards Bermuda. Now, this is a storm that, like we've seen in recent years, is forecasted to rapidly intensify, potentially to a major hurricane, a Category 3, before it slams into Bermuda. So this is a rapidly moving, rapidly intensifying storm. The only silver lining here is that it is a fast-moving storm, so it is not forecasted as of now to linger over Bermuda, but it is forecasted to become a major hurricane. So a lot of concern about what it could potentially do once it reaches Bermuda.
Got it. All right, Christian, thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. All right, for more on this, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with first look at the national forecast. Grant, worried about the folks in Bermuda?
Yeah, watching out for Bermuda. It's amazing how that tiny little nation somehow gets in the crosshairs of these massive hurricanes as they strengthen and track to the north. I want to take you back to Puerto Rico, where overnight they've picked up a lot of rainfall, like Christian was just talking about. 5.19 inches of rain has fallen in Penepobre so far, and that's actually of 5 o'clock this morning. So we're waiting for another update from the National Weather Service down there. Several communities across Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands underneath flash flood warnings. And it's not just the rainfall that comes down, but it's some of the mountainous terrain where the mountains enhance the rainfall, and then all that rainfall then funnels down into the lower lying areas where you find some of those landslides and some of the increased threat for flooding. And that will continue. You see the bands from what is now a departing Ernesto still bringing in that very heavy rainfall to portions of Puerto Rico. Watch here the latest forecast track as Ernesto rapidly intensifies as it tracks to the north, like Christiane just said, becoming a major Category 3 hurricane by the time we get into the weekend. For us here in the lower 48, while not a direct impact, we'll be watching for rough surf and rip currents through the second half of the week and into early next week. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thanks very much. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Turning now to the Middle East, where hopes are dimming for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. This is just one day ahead of scheduled talks. A Hamas representative tells CBS News that even though they will not be attending tomorrow's talks, they plan to continue taking part in the negotiations. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following the latest for us from Tel Aviv and has more on this. Ramy, these discussions happening without Hamas, what is the outlook for peace in the region?
Sure, Vlad, good to see you. Well, outlook for peace in the region here definitely at least feels dimmer than it was 24 hours ago. The Israel-Hamas talks, by their very name, were supposed to include Hamas. Now they will not be. Now, Hamas's representative in Lebanon told CBS News overnight many criticisms of the government here in Israel, of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that they have not replied to a proposal from about 6 weeks ago, July 2nd, and that they have been changing conditions ever since then. And they also point out that they assassinated their chief negotiator, Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political wing of Hamas. But with that said, Hamas is leaving some room, some hope open, looking ahead after tomorrow. They said that with talks, if you can call them talks, going on tomorrow still, if there is some kind of breakthrough with the people who will be attending, then Hamas could come back after Thursday. But that depends on what happens there. Specifically, if Israel happens to say, look, we do agree, we do want to go back to that July 2nd proposal. In terms of the people going, though, this is also interesting. Of note, CIA Director William Burns and Israel spy chief David Barnea, both representing each other's countries.
So, Ramy, let me ask you about these talks with Iran, hoping to prevent a retaliatory strike on Israel. Is there a potential for that to not happen? In other words, everybody sort of has the feeling that Iran has to do something. But of course, even they don't want to see an all-out war in the region. So how does that needle get threaded with diplomacy from the United States and other partner nations who are in discussions and applying pressure to Iran?
Sure. Vlad, first off, to be clear that there are no official, publicly known talks between Iran and other powers. But what is understood is that there are back-channel talks going on through interlocutors, through mediators. But what is publicly known is that top officials, top leaders of specifically Western countries, the United States, the UK, Germany, France, and even the Vatican, they've been trying to encourage Iran to step back from the brink, the threats it's been making to retaliate against Israel. And the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, said in reply specifically to the Vatican official that it is a legal right for Iran to retaliate against an aggressor, to have punitive measures. But with that said, though, there is a lot of back-channeling going on. We don't know what that is, but what could be the crux here is that the fact that the Israel-Hamas talks, while they're going on tomorrow still, and Hamas has said that they could come back to the negotiating table, for the mere fact that Hamas is an ally, is a proxy supported by Iran, if Hamas leaders say, hey, listen, we do want to go ahead with this, Iran may very well allow Hamas to take the lead and to look what happens over the next few days, few weeks.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Rami. I mean, that was sort of my point, that these back channel discussions are most likely happening. And the question is whether or not Iran, I guess, will respond to them. Because if you see all the reporting from you and others, they sort of feel compelled to do something. But obviously, they don't want this to spiral out of control, especially given that the United States has now moved even more military assets into the region. So it's sort of a fascinating peek into realpolitik, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be looking ahead to the next few days and see what happens, but we'll keep you posted.
All right, Rami. Thanks for your reporting, man. Appreciate it. Okay, let's talk about Ukraine, which says it has captured nearly 400 square miles of territory in Russia's Kursk region. And there are reports that Russia is withdrawing some of its forces from Ukraine in response to the offensive. CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams joins me now from London to talk about all this. So, Holly, this is really, really interesting. How significant of a gain is this for Ukrainian forces, and how embarrassing is it for President Vladimir Putin?
Hey there, Vlad. Well, look, this is the biggest foreign incursion into Russia since World War II. Began around a week ago with a surprise attack by the Ukrainians. And for Vladimir Putin and the Russian army, it is nothing short of a humiliation. We've seen video of Russian soldiers who've apparently been captured in their own country, a country that used to be a superpower, driven blindfolded back into Ukraine. Now, it's been nearly 2.5 years since Vladimir Putin ordered his military to invade Ukraine. And not only has he failed to defeat the Ukrainians, not only has Russia suffered a string of embarrassing failures on the battlefield, but now Ukraine says it controls nearly 400 square miles of Russian territory. Now, Russia claims that it is now repelling the Ukrainian advance, but in scenes reminiscent of the early days of the invasion of Ukraine, we are now seeing Russians fleeing their homes and Russians lining up for humanitarian aid.
So, Holly, does this advance hurt Ukraine's ability to defend itself? In other words, are they spreading themselves out thinly?
Well, Vlad, Ukraine presumably hopes that by forcing Russia to divert its resources to a new front line in its own country, it thereby relieves pressure on the front line back in Ukraine. Remember, Russia is occupying around 20% of Ukraine at this point. And for Ukraine, it's also potentially about leverage. So if the two sides do agree to negotiate, now Ukraine finally has a bargaining chip. It can say, you give me back that bit of my country and I'll give you back this bit of yours. Now, what is the US perspective on all this? Well, the White House said that if President Putin doesn't like what's happening, then there's an easy solution. He can get out of Ukraine. And we've had even stronger language from Senator Lindsey Graham. He's a prominent supporter of Ukraine who's been visiting Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, this week. He called the Ukrainian incursion bold and beautiful and said, and this is a direct quote, "Putin started this, kick his ass." Vlad.
All right. Holly Williams reporting from London, obviously having covered this war since the very beginning. Thank you, Holly. All right. We are watching all of these feeds that are coming into the CBS News broadcasters from all around the country and happening right now. You're going to see behind me. Check this out. We're watching the manslaughter trial of Susan Lawrence. It's over here. That's where it is. She is the 60-year-old white woman accused of fatally shooting her 35-year-old black neighbor in Florida during a dispute about neighborhood children. We're monitoring the trial as they present new evidence and testimony. We're going to bring you any updates as they come in. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz will make stops in Denver and Boston today as he continues his first solo campaign tour since being named Kamala Harris's running mate. During his address to a major labor union in L.A. yesterday, Walz struck back at Republicans, calling their recent criticism inaccurate and unfair, and he defended his military record. Listen.
And by the way, these guys are even attacking me for my record of service. And I just want to say, I'm proud to serve my country, and I always will be. I signed up for the Army National Guard 2 days after my 17th birthday. I served for the next 24 years for the same reason all my brothers and sisters in uniform do. We love this country. Then in 2005, I felt the call of duty again, this time of being service to my country in the halls of Congress. My students inspired me to run for that office, and I was proud to make it to Washington.
Joining me now with the latest on the Harris campaign is CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro. So, Aaron, what we just heard there from the potential Vice President of the United States, Tim Walz, is a hit back at his opponent, J.D. Vance, who's been making this a point of his campaign stops. I note that J.D. Vance tweeted a response to Governor Walz's thanking Vance for his service. Is this sticking? I mean, are you seeing that this is having an effect on the Harris-Walz campaign? Because it's not the same as it was back when they tried to swift boat John Kerry. The political environment and the media environment is very different.
Vlad, good to be with you. It seems that it is the main attack that's sticking with Republican voters, Republican operatives. But in the past week, you saw tens of thousands at Harris-Walz campaign events in these battleground states. Voters there don't seem to be affected or feel that this is a significant attack. That being said, it is interesting that you heard Walz kind of broadly address that. Republicans have been lobbying a lot of criticism about his rank that he retired as, whether he actually used weapons of war in combat. In Walz's remarks yesterday, he kept it pretty broad, saying that he's proud of his service and that he doesn't want to denigrate anyone who has served in the military.
All right, Aaron Navarro tracking the campaign for us. Aaron, appreciate you.
Take care.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump and his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, are hitting the campaign trail today. Former president is set to make remarks on the economy in Asheville, North Carolina, while Vance holds a rally in Byron Center, Michigan. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley is trying to get Trump to turn the rhetoric around, saying in a Fox News interview that she thinks what they want is someone who's going to care about them. They want someone who's focused. She went on to say, this is a winnable election, but you need to focus. Who is your target market? Your target market is suburban women, college-educated independents, and conservative Democrats. CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins me now from Asheville, North Carolina. Olivia, you're in Asheville, where the former president is supposed to speak about the economy later today. Any indication that the former president is going to take that advice from Haley and from others and just stay focused on the issues?
Well, Vlad, that's the goal here today. When they announced this campaign stop, this remarks that he'd be giving on the economy last week, they made it a point to talk about that that's going to be the focus. Normally, they kind of just announce these rallies, but they wanted to make sure that the focus today was on the economy. And this is also coming as we just got that inflation report from this morning that shows that inflation is cooling, but it's coupled with that jobs report last week that was pretty dismal. Advisors I talked to with the Trump campaign tell me they feel that their economic policies are better for Americans. Economy and immigration, as we know, is such a huge part of their platform. But to your point about Nikki Haley, it is interesting that she's coming out and telling Trump, speaking directly on Fox News to Bret Baier, saying, let's stop talking about crowd sizes. Let's stop talking about whether or not Kamala Harris is black or Indian or any sort of other remarks that Trump brought up, questioning her background, and focus instead on the issues. Now, it's important because Haley was the last Republican contender to face off against Trump in that primary. So it's interesting now that Trump is facing a woman again. She's cautioning him against those attacks and telling him to focus back on the economy. And we'll be interested later today if that's what we're actually going to hear.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi for us. Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate it. And the former president has lost his third attempt to remove New York Judge Juan Merchan from his criminal case. Trump claimed a conflict of interest due to the judge's daughter's political work. It's the same argument that he made in his last two motions for Merchan's recusal. In his decision, Merchan wrote that Trump provided, quote, nothing new to this court to consider, merely repeated arguments that have already been denied. A jury found Trump guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Merchan is expected to sentence Trump next month. Okay, we're just a few days away from the start of the Democratic National Convention, and we've just learned about some of Vice President Kamala Harris's plans to kick off the week. We've got a full preview just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Hey, folks, welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of today's top stories we're watching. A white Ohio police officer will be arraigned today, accused in the deadly shooting of a pregnant black woman. Prosecutors say Blendon Township officer Connor Grubb shot 21-year-old Takia Young in a grocery store parking lot last August. Grubb and another officer suspected her of shoplifting alcohol. The officer fired his weapon when Young rolled her car towards him. He's facing charges of murder, involuntary manslaughter, and felonious assault. Japan's prime minister does not plan on running for re-election this September. Fumio Kishida was elected president of the governing Liberal Democratic Party back in 2021, but corruption scandals have cost him support. Whoever wins the party vote will become the new prime minister. And take a look at this. Stunning images of the Aurora Borealis dancing in the night skies over Scotland. Dozens of shooting stars and dramatic lights could be seen on Monday night, as the lights also came during the peak of the Perseid meteor shower, illuminating the pre-dawn skies. Lovely. What else is lovely? Some new data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the consumer price index 0.2% last month, rose 0.2% last month. However, the data also reveals inflation is below 3% for the first time since 2021. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger joins me now to discuss this and more. So, Jill, break down this data. What does this data mean for the potential of perhaps interest rate cuts next month when the Fed meets?
You know, this was a modest report. I know that we're going to get real psyched. We're below 3% on the overall headline rate. But, you know, it's small improvement. And I think that what the Fed looks at is they look at the components of the consumer price index, what's going up, what's going down, and how they see what the direction is for various categories. And I think they're going to feel like, OK, this is the right direction, not as much as we'd like. But I do think that that September meeting will see the first rate cut of this cycle. It's interesting, though, because I think after the weaker than expected jobs report, a lot of economists and analysts were saying to me, oh, they're going to go by 0.5 percentage point at the September meeting. Maybe this report is back putting the 0.25 percentage point cut back on the table. We'll see, but you know, it's going to be interesting to see how the Fed officials really feel about the various aspects of this report and where they see that there needs to be more work being done.
Yeah, so let me also ask you about the index for shelter, which also rose. It rose 0.4%. What's your takeaway from that data point?
You know, I think the shelter index is very important. It represents 1/3 of the overall inflation rate, but it also means that when it accelerates, it does sort of weigh down the consumer price index. So the government in this report said that shelter or housing was responsible for 90% of the monthly increase in the consumer price index, 70% of the annual part of the index. And that's really kind of a weird thing, because when you look at the way the government figures out shelter, what they do is they take rent paid to landlords, and then for a homeowner, they say, okay, what would it cost to rent your home in the current housing market? And economists say this shelter index is not reflecting what's happening on the ground, that we are not seeing rents go up by 5% year over year, that we're not seeing housing costs go up 5% year over year, and that this is masking better progress on the consumer price index. Of course, the index is what it is, so they're not going to change the formula now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jill, always great to have you. Thank you, my friend.
Sure.
The Biden administration has approved a plan to sell $20 billion worth of military equipment and weapons over the next several years to Israel. Congress was notified of the sale yesterday. CBS News Pentagon reporter Eleanor Watson joins me now to talk about this. So, Ellie, this is really interesting. Walk us through this package from the United States, and more importantly, how vital is it to Israel's protection?
Thanks for having me. The biggest part of the package is up to 50 F-15 jets that will eventually significantly add to Israel's already existing fleet of F-15s, some of which were involved in Israel's defense against Iran's attack in April. It could take up to a decade for all of those deliveries to be completed of the new jets, but some of the other items in the package, including tank ammunition and air-to-air missiles, those could come a bit sooner, 2 to 5 years, and those are really to replenish Israel's stocks that it's been using in its war against Hamas. So the sale was not only it will not only take some time to complete, but we've been actually expecting it since April. The announcement of it now, while the region is on high alert to a potential attack by Iran and Hezbollah on Israel, shows really two things. One, the U.S. support of Israel as its closest ally, and two, its leverage over Israel as Israel's largest weapons supplier, as the Biden administration continues to pressure all parties, including Israel, to come to ceasefire negotiations to stop the war in Gaza.
So that's that weapons sale and delivery is expected to happen over the next couple of years, as you pointed out, Ellie. So talk to me about what's happening right now. What kind of U.S. military assets have been deployed to the region should Iran try to strike Israel directly?
Right. We've been bracing for this since for about 2 weeks. Iran's warned of retaliation, as well as Hezbollah. In April, if you remember, the U.S. had several destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean to defend against missiles from Iran. What's different about this potential attack is the contribution from Hezbollah, the potential contribution from Hezbollah. They played a part in April, but they themselves have vowed their own retaliation for an Israeli strike that killed a Hezbollah commander at the end of July. So the U.S. really is moving additional assets, more than what they had in April. The Secretary of Defense on Sunday, in a rare acknowledgement of where guided missile submarines are, said he has ordered one of them to the Central Command area of responsibility to defend, but also to show Iran and its proxies, please consider what you do here, because we have a lot of military might to support the defense of Israel.
All right. Ellie Watson reporting from the Pentagon for us this morning. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Appreciate it. All right. We are tracking Tropical Storm Ernesto, which could become a hurricane shortly. So let's bring back CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, Vlad, yeah, waiting for that 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Wind speeds right now sustained at 70 miles per hour. It takes a 74-mile-per-hour tropical system to be classified as a hurricane. We'll get to Ernesto in just a second. I want to talk a little bit about the heat across portions of the southern plains. Look at these temperatures. Current temps across places like Oklahoma, Dallas, all the way down to New Orleans. Current temperatures are in the middle and upper 80s. Very little relief from heat overnight. And then, well, temperatures are really going to soar as we go into the afternoon. Several places underneath heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, with feels-like temperatures well into the 100s this afternoon. And this is going to be a long-term heat wave, especially for places across Oklahoma into Texas, where feels-like temperatures today are there between 100 to 110 degrees. Elsewhere across the country, we got rain across the Central Plains into the northern tier states, and still very nice weather up into the Northeast. The Northeast is going to have to watch for indirect impacts coming from Ernesto. Direct impacts, though, still hitting Puerto Rico this morning, with several areas underneath flash flood warnings, not only Puerto Rico, but also back into the Virgin Islands, the BVI, the USVI, dealing with heavy rainfall overnight and then continuing today. This is a 3-hour loop of the radar. Even though the center of the storm passed over the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico is still getting pounded by waves of very heavy rainfall, so flooding will be an ongoing concern throughout the day today, if not into the next couple of days. There was the center of the storm passing east of Puerto Rico over the Virgin Islands. The center of the storm now north of Puerto Rico. It's moving to the northwest right around 16 miles per hour. That's the good news. It's actually moving pretty quickly, and it will continue to accelerate north as it strengthens. Here's the latest forecast track. This is from the 8 o'clock advisory. It's expected to rapidly intensify to a Category 3 hurricane. If not by tomorrow, it looks to be by at least Friday morning. Cat 3 hurricane maybe weakening slightly as it approaches Bermuda. It always amazes me how that tiny nation somehow always is in the crosshairs of that forecast cone of a hurricane as we head through the months of August into September. Now, the forecast cone takes it well to the east of the whole eastern seaboard. However, those indirect impacts, higher surf, bigger waves, and also rip currents are going to be a concern from the Carolinas all the way to the northeast up into portions of Nova Scotia and the Canadian Maritimes as we go through the weekend into next week. So while the weather may be nice along the eastern seaboard, just know that those beaches are going to be a little bit dangerous to get into, and that concern for rip currents and high surf is probably going to continue into early next week. Vlad, watching this one closely because it could become the second major hurricane that we've had so far this year, and And as you know, the peak of hurricane season isn't until September 10th.
Boy. All right, Grant. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, will embark on a bus tour through Pennsylvania on Sunday. That's ahead of the Democratic National Convention. The tour will begin in Pittsburgh and will make several stops throughout the day for some more intimate stops to meet with voters. And it comes as the DNC released its list of featured speakers for next week's convention, including former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and including current President Joe Biden and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So joining me now for more on this is senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Very interesting list, Ed. What are you hearing about the DNC's agenda and the plans for the convention? If I recall correctly, President Biden kicks off on day one.
That's right. Monday night will be a tribute to the current president and all he's done over the last 3 years and change. They will also hear from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who in another realm might have been showing up for a tribute to her after 8 years in office. But here we are. Tuesday will be a Chicago boy, Barack Obama, and others who are expected to speak that night. No surprise that the former president will be there and be involved in this. Former President Bill Clinton on Wednesday, along with Tim Walz, as he's formally nominated as the vice presidential nominee, and then, of course, Kamala Harris on Thursday night. There are going to be a smattering of others, current, former, future stars of the party as well, speaking throughout the week. The fact that you have 2 formers, 1 current, and 1 potential future speaking, however, gives this party, the Democrats, a little bit of an advantage over the Republicans, given that no other former Republican president, George W. Bush basically, was invited to appear in Milwaukee. The other thing that they're doing in Chicago during the day is what they're calling, and I didn't come up with this, Vlad, Demapalooza. Of course, Lollapalooza is well known in Chicago as a major concert festival. Demapalooza, painful to say, is going to be held every day during the day at McCormick Place, which is the city's major convention center, open to the public. They're going to do a series of public events, sort of a festival, food stuff, but also some training sessions for Democrats who are in town or anyone else who wants to sign up to get sort of basic training on how to organize, how to knock on doors, how to, sell the Democratic agenda to voters. They're going to do lessons on things like, as they put it, the dangers of the Project 2025 agenda that Republicans, or at least conservative think tanks here in Washington, have been pushing. All of it designed to bring the convention closer to people in the Chicago area or others who will be in town. Thousands of people expected to show up for this. And then the United Center, the home of Michael Jordan, will be transformed into the home of the Democratic Party for those 4 nights next week.
So as you know, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are not baby boomers, but it does sound like that Demapalooza thing came up was, some baby boomer was like, how we galvanize young people? They love Lollapalooza in Chicago, Demapalooza, and everybody's sitting around and they all clap. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. It's a little lighthearted fun, Ed. But let's talk about how important the week before, this week, the week that we're in right now, the trips that the governor is making on his own and what they plan on doing this weekend before the convention. How important is that before this big party, this big celebration that the Democrats are staging next week?
Sure. Well, Tim Walz actually did something yesterday to sort of clean up the one big line of attack on him from Republicans by sort of defending and explaining his military service during a speech to a union in California. Today, tomorrow, he is raising money. He wakes up in Denver today to start there. He's going to Rhode Island and Long Island to do so for the rest of the week. That big bus tour they're doing Sunday is a good chance to see the foursome, the 2 candidates and their spouses together on the trail. They've been out there already. They were in Philadelphia when the ticket was announced. But doing that kind of an event in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania on the eve of the convention is designed to build momentum. That they're doing it in Pennsylvania is no mistake because both campaigns understand that one is the real must-win mathematically to get to 270 electoral votes. Don't be surprised during convention week if we see Harris and or Walz out on the road in battleground states before they come back to the convention site in Chicago. And after that, it's game on because you'll have 2 sets of nominees, their running mates, out on the road, and the general election will begin in earnest, really, there right before Labor Day.
All right. Ed O'Keefe reporting from the White House for us. Ed, thank you, my brother. I know you'll be there all next week. We appreciate you. Yeah. And as a reminder, as you just heard me say, Ed and the rest of our CBS News team will have special coverage of the events in Chicago. That starts on Monday, August 19th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Okay, former President Donald Trump and Elon Musk are accused of threatening union workers during their conversation on X earlier this week. Coming up, details about the federal labor charges the United Automobile Workers Union filed. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. There's been some fallout from former President Donald Trump's X conversation with Elon Musk. The United Auto Workers Union is accusing them of advocating to fire union workers who go on strike. UAW President Shawn Fain joined us on America Decides last night and says he wants Trump and Musk to be held accountable.
The rich keep getting richer at the expense of the working class, and people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they sneer at labor law, but they don't care about labor law because they don't care about working class people. Employers need to be held accountable in this country when they break the law. It is a federal right of workers to go on strike, and they cannot be fired for that. But, you know, people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they laugh about firing people because they can care less about people and about their jobs and what they do to their careers.
CBS News Detroit reporter Jordan Burroughs joins us now to talk about this. So, Jordan, break down the exact comments that Trump and Musk made, and are they acknowledging this lawsuit?
We know that according to UAW President Shawn Fain, he said those comments were, quote, disgusting from former President Donald Trump and Tesla CEO Elon Musk. The exact comments they made were threatening to intimidate people who go on strike. Even more so, they said that they would be making fun of people who would go on strike in general or fire them. We know there was that historic UAW strike last year, 46 days long. Shawn Fain says he's not going to stand for these comments. We also know, according to the National Labor Relations Committee, the National Labor Relations Act, that is, it is illegal to fire someone who is on strike. More so, it is illegal to threaten someone who is going to go on strike as well.
So how important of a role will the union and the union members play in November? What's your sense of that, Jordan?
So our sense on that is that it obviously plays a big role, right? There are millions of UAW members. There are retirees and current members of the UAW. When you look at the election, the UAW widely supports the Democratic candidate in this case that's looking to be like Vice President Kamala Harris. 60% of UAW members, whether that's retirees or current members of the UAW, support the Democratic Party. And usually that, 30 to 35% would vote toward the Republican Party. It's not make or break, but Vlad, we do know that the Democrats are expecting to get this vote. It would be a good vote to have in the background for Kamala Harris's campaign.
All right, Jordan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. There is another new twist in the Jordan Chiles Olympic medal controversy and Team USA's efforts to reinstate her bronze medal. Got the very latest coming up. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The number of Catholic churches in the United States is growing, but the number of priests is on the decline. A parish in California is taking an innovative approach to attract more people to the priesthood. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassman takes a closer look.
For Catholics in Central California, bigger means better.
God the Father is in us.
And St. Charles Borromeo Church feels heaven sent. Bishop Joseph Brennan leads the Diocese of Fresno.
This is a Catholic megachurch.
The biggest Catholic parish church in North America, St. Charles cost $21 million to build, seats 3,200, and sprawls over nearly an acre.
Are you still struck by the scale of this place? Very much so.
Father Alex Chavez.
As big as this place is, could you have made it even bigger?
Yes, but there's room for growth, right? I could always add masses.
But what's too small? The number of priests throughout the Catholic Church, a labor crisis decades in the making.
Like this sanctuary, the U.S. Catholic Church's manpower challenge is enormous. Over a half century, the average size of a parish increased by 60%, while the number of priests dropped by 40%.
Oh, it's huge, and it's really across the board.
Why is this shortage what it is?
Well, it's complicated, but there are all kinds of issues.
Among them, inadequate recruiting of young men, societal issues including materialism and career success, family issues such as broken homes, and the legacy of the church's sex abuse scandals. We watched the Fresno Diocese ordain 6 new priests, their most since 1968. Bishop Brennan says he could use 25.
We're responding to a very real need. So Jesus would walk through the door and say, well, it's not what I had in mind, but way to go, guys. It's a creative approach.
I asked 3 of those newly ordained priests, Herman Cabrera, Jimmy Milan, and Joseph Kling, why so few men today hear the call that they did.
I think nowadays, especially for my generation, commitment's a strong word.
And you've heard that they need priests. Was that an added imperative to become one yourself?
I mean, so yeah, I would say it was definitely part of my discernment. And so I think we all come into this knowing that the priesthood has a certain image.
What were you talking about in particular?
I mean, I've had people call me pedophile just for wanting to be a priest. And there's wounds, there's scars, because that's a horrible thing.
So you see this turning around?
I definitely.
I have hope, yeah,
I believe
absolutely.
so too.
Until it does, this megachurch merges 4 parishes into one behemoth. At 3 Sunday Masses, 8,000 parishioners in total fill the pews.
Do you see this megachurch solution as a prototype?
Most definitely. Yeah, being here now 1 year, yeah, very much so.
Consider St. Charles a new testament to the power of what's mighty. For Eye on America, Mark Strassman in Visalia, California.
There is a new development in the dispute over that girl, as she calls herself. We're talking about Jordan Chiles, whose bronze medal from the Paris Olympics was taken away and awarded to a Romanian gymnast. Well, according to the New York Times, the head of the panel that made the ruling has represented Romania in arbitration cases for almost a decade. USA Gymnastics said on Monday that the court would not reconsider stripping Chiles of her medal in spite of video evidence showing the decision was wrong. Under the court's rules, panel members must reveal any conflict of interest and possibly recuse themselves from those cases. The head of the panel is serving as Romania's legal counsel in current disputes. We've reached out to that member. They have said that they are not commenting. Okay, switching gears, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with one final look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, Vlad, still watching the National Hurricane Center for their 11 o'clock advisory. We're expecting Ernesto to become a hurricane as it heads through its rapid intensification. Big word for just saying this thing is going to really strengthen quickly. Rapid intensification is when a tropical system increases its wind speeds by 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. So that's something that we expect as Ernesto now begins to pull north of Puerto Rico this morning. Still bringing heavy rainfall to the islands right now, but that will slowly begin to let up. But ongoing flash flood warnings from Puerto Rico back into the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. Here's the latest forecast track as Ernesto strengthens and tracks to the north. In fact, we just got in our 11 o'clock advisory, so it is now technically a hurricane. Hurricane Ernesto is now on its way to rapidly intensify to a Category 3 hurricane as it approaches Bermuda, maybe weakening slightly, but still a very strong hurricane as it stays well east of the coast, but still bringing rough surf and rip currents to the eastern seaboard through the weekend. Vlad, back to you.
All right, my brother, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. Folks, an encore presentation of CBS Mornings is next. You're watching CBS News 24/7.